business news now, and it's been a smoking hot day in the energy markets. European natural gas prices surged by more than a third at the start of trading after Russia halted all flows through the Nordstream pipeline over the weekend. The disruption has spilled over to the stock market, with most European share benchmarks down by a whopping 6%. Meanwhile, oil-producing nations added fuel to the fire, announcing a cut in production from next month. Well, here to discuss the surging energy markets and the other business news of the day, including the economic quagmire that awaits the new UK Prime Minister, is Arise correspondent Laurie Laird, who is standing by in London. Good to see you, Laurie. Let's start with gas prices, a 30% surge. How is Europe going to manage?
Excellent question, and it's not entirely clear. Right now, a lot of the producers in Northern Europe, particularly in Scandinavia, are struggling to survive, Germany as well, because they pre-sold a lot of their energy at fixed prices. Now they're scrambling in the spot market to try and get hold of gas to fulfill these deliveries, and they're having to pay a spot market prices, which are 10, 20, 15%, name your price, above where they had originally contracted to buy this stuff. So the survival of these distribution companies is very much in question. Sure, they will have to be bailed out by governments. In fact, we've already seen that in Germany, but these companies, and I think we'll have the same in the UK, are going to have to be bailed out, because if there's anything that's an essential industry, it would be the provision of electricity.
Well, absolutely. And that raises the question of what the consequences of all of this is likely to be. I mean, could we possibly see blackouts?
I think that we could. They may be sporadic. It may be in different areas of Europe. But before we get to blackouts, I think it's almost inevitable that we will see rationing. And most of that rationing will probably take place amongst businesses. Businesses don't necessarily vote. It's easier to impose some kind of rationing on big business than it is in individual households. But we have not seen, with the exception of Germany, Germany has been very candid with its people, with voters, about the sacrifices that are going to have to be made. The thermostats have been turned down, air conditioning turned down in German buildings, lights have been dimmed in France as well. In the UK, we haven't seen that kind of candor. And I think that with any kind of information campaign, people can be convinced to consume their electricity outside of peak hours if they know that there's an incentive to do so, like avoiding blackouts. But the peak use of energy time here in the UK is about 7 p.m. So if you can avoid doing your washing, your dishwasher, that kind of thing after 7 o'clock, it's helpful for the entire grid.
Well, let's turn to the oil-producing nations, Laurie. They're not making things any easier, are they, with OPEC deciding to cut output? I mean, what's been the market reaction to that?
But this was pretty much expected. We didn't think that OPEC would cut output at this meeting. We thought they may wait until October, but in the event they cut by a little bit. It's more of a symbolic cut than anything else. It's not 0.1% of daily demand that they're cutting. The market has reacted. Oil up about 4%. We're at $96 a barrel, which is slightly above where we were before February of 24th. We get the sense that OPEC would really be comfortable seeing oil at $100 a barrel. But if Joe Biden thought he was going to get anything out of Saudi Arabia for that trip, that fist bump he had with the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, he's not getting what he wanted, which is to open the taps and put more oil in the market.
I'm afraid. But I mean, nevertheless, it does appear, though, as though OPEC remains a force to be reckoned with.
Isn't this interesting, Charles? Because we have written that OPEC obituary so many times, and I think you and I have discussed it over the years, that as other producers like Russia, like the US, become more important, that OPEC would lose its stranglehold on the oil market. We are not seeing that at all. OPEC only produces about a third of the daily demand for oil, but they still have managed to keep such a hold on the market. What OPEC says, and particularly what Saudi Arabia, as the swing producer in OPEC, says, that still rules the market.
Well, let's turn to the UK where you are, Laurie. Liz Truss confirmed as the new leader of the Conservative Party and by extension, the new Prime Minister. She's inheriting a rather challenging economic outlook, though, isn't she?
Can you, Charles, who would want this job at the moment? The Prime Minister of the UK has a dreadful time ahead of them, more so than other developed countries. Inflation is higher in the UK than other developed countries. Growth is slowing more rapidly in the UK than any other country. But we did have Liz Truss fought very hard for this, for the nomination, for the victory amongst Conservative Party members. So she will take over tomorrow, and we'll be looking very much forward to hearing what she has to say about the economy.
Yes, and I'm wondering whether there's been any indication at all, Laurie, about what she's likely to do about things like the cost of living crisis and, of course, energy prices, because there's talk of a possible cap, isn't there?
Absolutely, but that talk, I'm glad you brought that up. There's a talk of a cap, there's talk of perhaps freezing prices at the previous cap that was set back in April. A new cap is meant to take effect in October, which raises prices by 80%, a massive, massive rise. Some talk that Truss's team is thinking about removing that second cap, freezing prices at the old cap. But this is very, very new talk. This has been in the media today throughout the campaign. Liz Truss has spoken so very little about the cost of living crisis. I think her calculus was that the cost of living crisis isn't quite as crucial to the people who voted, the Conservative Party members that voted to put her as leader of the party. It's certainly much more an issue for poorer, more vulnerable households. So it felt a little bit like she she felt like she didn't have to really stress that in the campaign. But she's Prime Minister now. She's not running for office. She has to govern the whole country. So yes, you're absolutely right. Some talk of a freeze on energy prices, and we may get some result with that as early as tomorrow morning.
Well, we'll be looking forward to that. And just to mention, there's also been talk of potential tax cuts as well. But let's move across the pond. Some tragic news out of the world of US retailing.
Absolutely, Charles. This really is a tragic news, and it definitely is something that so many people in New York are talking about, despite the fact that it's a public holiday in the U.S. Gustavo Arnal was the chief financial officer of a company called Bed Bath and Beyond. Bed Bath and Beyond is a big box retailer, massive, big square footage, and it sells homewares, all sorts of homewares. We see a picture right here. It's had a very, very difficult time of late. A lot of the retailing industry has, particularly retailers that are dependent on bricks and mortar outlets rather than don't have much of an online outlet, has been struggling, has just announced a turnaround plan, which investors were not particularly impressed with. But the company is also Mr. Arnault was being investigated for selling his shares at a high. Shareholders have sued him for perhaps manipulating the market. He died overnight on Sunday, and it appears that he jumped out of an apartment building in New York. Extremely tragic.
Well, absolutely. We've got just under a minute left, Laurie, and more sad news out of India. I understand the country has lost one of its great tycoons.
Absolutely, Charles. And honestly, that really, we don't usually have this much terrible news in the business broadcast. Cyrus Mistry, who is one of the biggest names in Indian politics, died in a car accident very late last night. He was known across India, but one of the things that he was best known for is he had a terrible tussle with Tata, the massive Indian conglomerate, biggest Indian company on Indian soil. Sorry, a tautology there. He was one of the first non-Tatas to be put in the chief executive's chair at Tata, fell out spectacularly with the board, and then it went to court. He was finally removed by a court order from that post. But despite that turmoil, very, very well respected in Indian industry and beyond.
And on that tragic note, Laurie, thanks very much indeed. Laurie Laird, I
hope to have better news for you tomorrow.
Yes, look forward to it. Talking to me there from London.